For all the ones that don't know me yet, I'm Lucia. I'm the founder of the BD School, which is the first educational platform entirely dedicated to business development. So our mission is to create the next generation of business developers and founders using the power of knowledge. Therefore, we share a lot of content that you can use in your day-to-day job to become better business developers. But today, I'm not alone. There is Vinay from Capital Placement, and I'm super excited to have him here. And I want you to introduce yourself and get these beautiful people to know you.
Hey, thanks, Lucia. It's great to be on here. So my name is Vinay. I'm the CEO of Capital Placement. I'm also a partner in a management consulting company with a very original name called the Consulting Company. So we're in the business of helping university students and recent graduates break into the career that they want to go into in amazing cities around the world like London, New York, and Singapore.
Awesome. It's really cool. And for how long do you have the company actually? When did you start?
2012. So October 2012 is when we started. So yeah, it reminds me of how old I am, basically, every time like someone asks me that question. So yeah, we're in our we're about to start our 10th year next year. So super excited. It's been a really interesting journey. And we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but I'm so excited for this one because business development is always like an area that I'm always interested in talking about. So this is going to be super fun.
Awesome. And I can imagine also having an investment firm as well, I guess, and consultancy as well. Probably you receive a lot of requests that relate to business development a lot. So I think you can advise us on many levels. So from the recruitment perspective, but also entrepreneurial perspective. So very excited about this one. So as I mentioned to you already, we collected already some questions from the audience. And business developers prove to be very challenging as an audience. We have a lot of questions, a lot of good questions. So I like to just move on with those and get started talking about business development and what companies actually expect from us. So yeah, maybe we can start by getting to know a little bit better what type of companies and jobs companies post when it comes to business development. So what is it that they are usually looking for?
Sure. Okay. So it really depends because on our podcast, when we last had a chat, what we talked about is often business development is also kind of bundled with marketing and potentially sales, especially at early stage startups. So it depends on the type of companies that you look at. So if you go to a very small team, so anywhere under kind of 10, 15 people, often the roles are the borders are blurred. So you might do a bit of marketing, you do a bit of sales, you do business development. So if that's where you see a career, the type of job descriptions tend to be quite broad in nature. Well, if you go to some of the bigger companies where often, they have dedicated not just a person, but potentially a whole team of business developers, you will have very focused and very specialized areas. And within those, there's often a hierarchy as well. So you might go in as an intern or as a very junior business development associate. Then you go into a supervisory role, a management role, a VP role, a director, etc. So quite a big range of not just breadth, but depth in terms of the roles as well. So I think in terms of the type of companies that are hiring, one of the biggest areas, obviously, tech companies, especially enterprise SaaS platforms. So what I mean by SaaS is service as a software as a service. And they're very, very big companies. And what I mean by enterprise sales is where they're looking to target big companies, big corporates with their software. So that's where you see a lot of business development opportunities. But that's not me saying there aren't opportunities or great opportunities in smaller firms. Some of the smaller firms are probably the better ones, especially in my personal opinion. So do not discount those small ones.
Nice. Yeah, that's good that you say that, because personally my heart is more into, startups trying to make it rather than, big SaaS companies. I don't know. I find SaaS always a little bit heartless, they're like too product focused, while I do like the relation with people, and I think in business development is quite important. And so in terms of course, the job descriptions can vary really a lot from a company to a company, but did you see or did you notice some skills that are always really in demand when it comes to business development, maybe across industries as well?
Sure. I think we can split this into hard skills and soft skills, and I'll focus a bit more on the soft skills because I think that's what makes a very good business developer.
Mhm.
And so if we look at things like perseverance, again, this is something that me and you discussed, and it's you need to follow up. I said, if you're a good business developer, you do need to learn to persevere and keep following up with a customer, and or at least keep following up until they say no. And also, on the other side of the coin, no does not mean never. It means it's no for the time being. Go back perhaps a few months down the line and check in with them again. So that's where perseverance comes in. And the other thing is, I think number one is people skills. And if you're going into enterprise SaaS again as like a example, or we could take some of the smaller companies, but if you're trying to sell to bigger companies or large organizations, which a lot of small businesses are trying to do, the sales cycles are so long. And so you've got to be able to build up a relationship with these people that could last months, if not years. And so you've got to be personable. People have to like you. If they don't, it's very easy to say no. So and if they do like you, it's very difficult for them to say no. So that's what a really good soft skill is. But on the hard side of things, CRM systems, like you've got to be able to use HubSpot if you're going into a startup or a small size company. If you're going into some of the larger ones, like Salesforce, that tends to be the dominant one. So those are a couple of things that I would focus on if I was looking at developing skills in the near future.
Cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and I also personally I do think that when it comes to business development, like soft skills are a lot more important than hard skills. Like hard skills, pretty much you can learn everything. We can learn how to use a CRM relatively quickly, but
Yeah.
you can't really learn very quickly how to be persistent, or like how to communicate well with your people. So yeah, that's really cool. And then my next question would be still like into like the expectations of companies, but more on the let's say the prickly side of business development, because it has to do with goals and KPIs. So of course, like what we said already before, every job description is it's very blurred, and there are so many different disciplines which are mixed into one. So I'm not sure actually how accurate you can be with this answer, but what are the goals and KPIs that you can usually find in a business development role?
Sure. So it's often not disclosed in a job description. It's very rare that companies will disclose what the expectations are, but that's something that they often talk about in an interview. If they are not bringing it up, I would highly encourage you as a candidate to bring it up, because I think it's very important to know what the expectations are, what succeeding in that role looks like, and what failure in that role looks like as well. And then see for yourself if that's achievable. And unfortunately, one of the things that you realize is companies always tend to have unusually high expectations. And as both entrepreneurs, me and Lucia can say this, where, our expectations are often very high. And it's the same with a lot of companies. And so an interview is a really good time to kind of ask those questions, try and understand what the expectations are and see for yourself if that is achievable. As Lucia said, it does depend. If you are selling very, very sophisticated software to hospitals, potentially getting 2 deals in a year is all that takes. Well, if you're trying to sell, like as a HubSpot CRM as an example, you probably need to sell thousands every day in order to make that viable. So it really does depend. That is the short answer.
And but this, like that's my curiosity mostly. Like, why do you think companies don't put the targets and KPIs in the job description? What's your take on that? Or maybe some of them told you.
Competitors. Competitors. It's just very simple, because they don't want their competitors to know. Any good kind of entrepreneur will keep an eye out for what their competitors are doing, how they're growing, etc. And it's not just it's not looking over your shoulder. It's just to kind of sometimes just to see if you as a company, or if you as an entrepreneur and your company are growing as fast as you really should be. And the best way to do it is benchmark yourself against your competitors. So if I was to use a Formula One example, like if you're driving a car, you're always looking at what your other cars, what kind of times are they clocking in the laps, how many seconds are they taking, are they slow, are they quick, etc. Just like that. And with KPIs, you've got to be careful when you do put it out there. But in my experience, vast majority of people are very open and transparent with that in that interview stage. But they tend not to put that out there, because also it's this goes as part of like a broader conversation where you start putting numbers down in job descriptions because,
Mhm.
if I'm a huge fan of putting the salary in a job description, but I've been told by people that don't agree with me that, if say hypothetically we say 30 to 35,000 euros for this role, someone who's actually looking at 38 to 40,000 euros may be put off by that.
Mhm.
But if they actually applied to us and we were impressed, we could actually pay that. But then just because we didn't put that, we turned away someone that would have otherwise applied. So it's the same with KPIs where it might look unusually high, but then you might be doing really good with your SEO and you're getting a lot of inbound traffic that it's fairly easy to convert. So it depends. And so you don't want to put off some other potential candidates that could be a really good
Mm.
fit by putting unusually high numbers, or if you put down an unusually low number, people might think it's very easy. Try
Mhm.
selling software into hospitals and you'll see how difficult that is. So we have a custom client of ours that sells software into hospitals, and they say, like 3-4 really good deals a year is all we need, and it takes years to develop that sales cycle. So it depends, and that's the reason. I think a lot of those things, if they're not put on a job description, don't be afraid to bring it up in an interview and ask.
That's really cool. So like first, like indeed the hospital staff was oddly specific. So I'm happy that
No,
you
it's not that
mentioned.
ridiculous. Yeah, I know CEOs in this space, and they're talking about how difficult it is, and so I understand. Like they security is just next level, because what you don't want is your software to be hacked and your hospital to be shut down remotely because of a hack, and so the security screening, the code audits that go through is insane. And so yeah, it's a very specific example, but it just depends on who I speak to on that week when I give examples.
Yeah, I do totally the same. Also, in our training, when we do the live training, I'm just basically telling my week, and it's I'm
Yeah.
finding the right things that are on, spot on. And actually, because you gave me another idea, which is related to competitor analysis. Now, completely different topic. But yeah, indeed, guys, if you're looking for information about your competitors, maybe you can check the job descriptions and see what you
100%.
can extrapolate. So that's a good hack.
Yeah, and it's a good thing for salary as well, because if you're applying for a job, look at what their competitors are paying and see if it is in line with market rate. And the Glassdoor, the tools like that. So it's not just when you get into that role to see what your competitors are doing, but even before you get in, try and see what kind of software is your competitors using. Are they using a superior CRM system than yours that's capable of doing more? In that case, it's probably worth bringing that up in an interview and say, hey, I can see that you're using a slightly outdated system, and your competitor doing X, Y, Z. That will, to a good CEO, that will be impressive. So someone who's very insecure might see that as a threat, but most CEOs will take that very positively and say, okay, I'm glad that you've done your research. You not only looked into us, but you looked into our competitors as well. And you know how we stand against our competitors. So that's definitely a double thumbs up if it's a good CEO. So yeah, definitely look into competitors.
Awesome. And well, actually, you bring me directly to the next question because, well, I think, yeah, maybe it was Yana that asked this question in the chat and was, okay, so what type of questions can we ask to recruiters, to show that we care and to share, that we're the right people? So one was this one that you just mentioned, but do you have some other tips, to shine in an interview and show that we really care and we really want that job?
Sure. That's a really good question. So when you say recruiter, you're talking about someone that works directly with the company, right? Not like a
Yeah,
third party organization.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So I think some of the things I already touched upon very briefly, but things like company goals for this year. I think when you're on business development, you are the engine that drives growth in that company. And you've got to understand what the targets are and see how that compares to the last couple of years. I think I'm a huge fan of asking follow-up questions. So it's not just like, oh, what's your company goal this year? Or what's your sales target this year? Okay, you get a number. Okay, great. So how does that compare to last year and the year before? So if the company on average has been growing at 20%, but this year the CEO wants to grow at 100%, that's crazy. Unless he's increasing their sales team by 100%, or there's an extra budget within that team to grow at that rate. So ask follow-up questions. Don't just stop at that first question. And I think that to an interviewer is a really good trait, because especially as a business developer, you always got to kind of ask follow-up questions. So initially, I'll give you an example. You might pick up the phone. It might be a very cold call, and I'm giving you a sales example, but if you pick up the call, they're like, yeah, I'm not interested. If you just put the phone down at that when you hear that, that's not great. But what you want to do is, okay, thanks for letting me know you're not interested, but is there something about our product that you don't think is the right fit? They'll just be like, oh, like we already have this. But then this is where your knowledge will come in and you follow up and say, oh, actually, our software has XYZ on top, which means you save X amount of money or X amount of time. That is what you want to do. So you want to show traits of that in an interview. And so ask follow-up questions. So the original point I made was company goals this year. The other thing I also touched upon earlier is what does success look like in this role? Because what you want to know is what is the benchmark that you're measured against. And once you know that, you can then see for yourself, okay, everything I need to do, it should be geared towards that to make sure that I am succeeding in this role. And on the other side of the coin, what does failure in this role look like? And, like I said, going back to that hospital example, if you tell someone else that, oh, I made 2 sales last year, or my work brought in 2 new customers, people will laugh at you. But then if they realize that you're selling to hospitals, they're like, oh, that's super impressive. So you've got to kind of look at what does failure look like and get a really good understanding of that. And if you get close to that, you're failing. A couple of other things I'll usually tend to ask are like, what are you doing for inbound leads at the moment? Because I think there's a huge onus on business developers to go out there and find those. But you've got to make your life easy, and you've got to ask the people, like, what are you doing to bring in inbound leads, and see how that converts as well. So like what percentage of leads are inbound compared to outbound leads that we had to create. And a couple other questions, I don't want to give too much away, but I'll give a couple of good ones away. It's been like, what's your most effective strategy till date? So, and is that still happening? Is that still working, as an example? And if you, slightly off topic, I like to tell candidates, try and do as many interviews as you can. And if you go into 5, 6, 7, 8 different companies and ask them what's your most successful strategy, eventually when you do land a job, you can use all the strategy into that job, especially if you work for a small company. So you can look at some of the companies that have gone from like, turning over from 0 to like maybe 2 million, and use that strategy across 5, 6 different companies, implement it into a small startup that you're working with now. And that can boost your growth. So there are loads of things that you can take away from those interviews. So the interview is definitely a two-way street. Try and leverage the information that that other person has and get that, and try and learn from them as well during that interview. So those are a couple of questions that I would ask.
Awesome. And yeah, basically just be a business developer during the interview, do your needs analysis, and try to figure out, how you can help the company, basically how your skills fit in there. And that was so insightful. Thank you so much, really. I wrote down a couple of questions in the chat. So guys, next time use them. That's really nice. Perfect. And this, of course, I think, well, it's a perfect way, I guess, to get the recruiters or, the hiring managers as well to like you. But are there some other stuff that you should be doing during an interview to be liked by the other person?
Sure. I think obvious ones like turn up on time. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about those obvious ones, but I think often it's often overlooked, like just coming with the right energy into that room. No one likes talking to someone who talks like this all day for like an hour. So just come in with a bit of energy and sound enthusiastic. And that makes such a big difference in an interview. Vary your tone, like body language, etc. It goes a long way. And this is a good thing as a business developer. If you're going to be successful, you can't just have the same tone, whether that's over Zoom, whether that's over a phone call, etc. You want to sound excited for what you're doing. And so the same thing with an interview. So usually I say to a lot of candidates, just before you start the call, just take a second, take a deep breath, and just remind yourself, okay, let's pump ourselves up. Do like 10 burpees or something, do 10 press ups, do whatever that gets you going, and then go into that. So there's a good friend of mine who's a venture capitalist, and he has days where there's about 20, 25 businesses that pitch to them for money. And he said, it's not as easy. We have to sell ourselves as well to the companies, because they might have other companies that are interested in investing in them. So what he does is between each pitch, he does 10 press ups to sound energetic, because if you're listening to 20 pitches, it's dull. And so you've got to get yourself up. So it's the same thing when you're interviewing as well. So the other thing is, competitor analysis. Drop in, in your answers, incorporate all your research. So all the research that you've done, you want to demonstrate that you have gone out of your way to go do that research. So whether that's about competitors, about something that a company's done potentially recently, maybe it's an award that the company won recently, do all of that. And One, I'll give you an additional tip. I would say to anyone who's considering applying for a job, go to the company's website and read every single page on their website, especially the terms and conditions, because that will give you a really good idea as to what the company is like. Reading the terms and conditions is the biggest hack to really understand the company. If they're pro customer, which is great for business developers because it means that, if there's an issue, your company will back you. If it's to provide a refund or if it's just providing extra services, etc., read that company's terms and conditions. That will give you a very good idea as to what it's like to work there.
That's really cool. I never thought of that, and now I'm gonna check our terms and conditions to make sure they're on point. That's really
Sure.
cool. I never thought of that. Totally,
Yeah,
totally. Absolutely. Usually what I suggest is to check the reviews of the customers of that company, not only the other employees, but the customers. Because indeed, if a company is, like if there are only positive reviews about the company, what chances are they're good with their customers, but also with their teams. If you see a lot of negative reviews, don't bother. Like,
yeah,
don't.
definitely. And also, just to build on that point, I think if I know this is a very different question. This comes down to vetting the company as a candidate. I think ask the interviewer, how big is the team? How long has this team been here? Is a very good question. Why did the last couple of people in this role leave?
Mm-hmm.
And if the company is embarrassed or is trying to hide that question, it's probably not the best place. But if the company says, "Oh, the last person was with us for 3 years, but now they've gone on to work for Salesforce," that's great because that means you've got a template. If you go into that role, that you can see that someone else in that role has done that, and so look into and ask those questions. And I think these are tough questions. It takes a bit of it takes a bit of courage to ask these questions, and culturally not everywhere it will be welcomed. There will be places around the world where asking these tough questions may be seen as a negative, but I think most people on this call as well, most of us live in Western Europe and in North America where it's okay to ask this question. And if you're a very good business developer, the older you become and the more kind of track record you have, you can ask these tough questions fairly easily.
Awesome. Yeah, that's mentioned that you mentioned the track record because
Mm.
someone just asked, like, if you have some tips for someone that has no experience whatsoever yet
Mm.
because they just recently graduated. So how can you prove yourself in an interview, if you don't have experience yet?
Sure. I think I'm going to make a pretty broad assumption here, and I'm going to assume that they have some time on their hand. What I would say is train yourself in some of the tools. So at the very basic level, Salesforce, HubSpot, they all both have excellent training programs where you can do it online for free, and you can get a certificate that if you want, you can add to your CV. So if your CV is looking fairly empty, adding these certificates will add a few more lines and it'll fill up a page. So look at top 3 CRMs, do online courses on them. That's an obvious place to start. I would then say go one step further and look at productivity tools, because if you're a very good business developer, you're going to have a lot on your plate. You're going to be juggling like a million balls, there's a million deals that you're juggling. So being super organized is going to be useful. So things like Evernote or Trello. I'm a huge fan of Trello. We use Trello a lot internally. And so just being not just using Trello from like a very basic perspective, but like how can you get the most out of Trello? How can Trello work hard for me is what you need to look at. Look at productivity hacks on Trello. And then if you want to go one step further, look at automation, like using Zapier as an example, combining that with Trello, you can automate a lot of the emails, you can automate a lot of your follow-ups, etc. Just do that like crazy, and setting up like a really good Trello board where all your leads are kind of like organized and connect that with your HubSpot, etc. You can use Zapier to like connect information, pull information from HubSpot directly into Trello, etc. Learn how to do that. That will like make you stand out. So these are like the hard skills that you can teach, or at least things that you can learn in your spare time. Then what I would also say are, improve your soft skills as much as you can. And this is difficult and it is hard right now because obviously we all live in a pandemic where we're kind of like either in a full lockdown or semi-lockdown. So speaking to people is quite difficult, but try and find ways where you can speak with people, network with people. And on the point of networking, I would say there's a great hack here. If you're a young student who's about to start their career, And if you know the type of software or the type of company that you want to go for, so like, SaaS software as an example, and if you want to go into enterprise sale, which there's a lot of money available in, connect with buyers on the enterprise side. If they see you as a recent student or like a current student or a recent graduate, they're much more likely to engage with you on LinkedIn as opposed to if you said sales, like, SaaS salesperson, which they'll be like, no. They probably get like 20 invitations to connect a day. And if you've got anything to do with SaaS in your platform, in your profile rather, they'll just like decline that invitation. But if you're a student and you say, hey, I'm interested in this industry, can you give me some more information? It opens that door and you have a network of potential customers that you can reach into in a few months' time when you do land that job. So try and build relationships, not just with employers, but also potential customers down the line as well. And like I said, people are a lot more forgiving when you're a student or a recent graduate that's out of a job. They'll connect with you, they'll speak with you, they'll give you tips. And that is always a great way to kind of like in the future go back and say, hey, I now work for this company. We think we have a great product that you might be interested in. Can we have like a 15-minute conversation? That's a lot easier to do.
Totally, that's so true, and especially in business development, like you need to earn the trust of the of your potential customers or partners, right? So if you just go there with your value proposition, it's not going to work. So they need to see that you're similar. So you build a network. That's the first thing to do, definitely. Awesome, awesome. And so Paolo just asked one question about the CV actually. So he's asking, how does the bragging look like for the hiring manager on a CV? Just had a friend reading mine and he said it looked bland, especially for a salesperson. Any insights on that?
Okay, so if you're going for a sales role, numbers. What percentage of deals did you close? What does your leads to close ratio look like? What did you grow your sales like quarter by quarter or year by year, etc. So I think CV is not the place to be humble. So I would say, recruitment process, you're gonna kind of have to flip flop between the two. CV, brag. Interview, humble. So you got to kind of like, you don't want to come across like, lack of a better word, like a douchebag in an interview, which some people do. And so you don't want to come across as that, but on your CV, it's not the place to be humble. But put down your achievements. You have to, although that's what you're getting measured on. And it's like, when we're younger, a lot of us have played top comps where we have cards and we look at the stats and who gets the highest stats will win that card. Essentially, that's what CV is. You are someone's card. And so you've got to have the best stats on your CV, and do not go humble on your CV. Brag as much as you can on your CV. But when you go into an interview, tone it down a little. But, don't be afraid to use those numbers that you mentioned in your CV to back up an answer. If they ask you why you're a good fit for a role, then bring up the stats that you got. Okay, so I have a 20% success rate when it comes to leads to closing. So if that's a fairly good success ratio for most companies, they'll be happy with that. But also you got to look at what the industry is, etc. But definitely brag. This is where me and Lucia kind of disagree a little on the CVs, where Lucia is a huge fan of like creative ones, and I'm the exact opposite. I say keep it plain and simple for me. And the reason is I hate looking like, I'll give you an example. I've just published a job description for business development role, which is quite ironic. And within 4 days, we had 480 applications.
Wow.
And so for us, someone has to sift through that. And if it's creative and it's all really nice and stuff, I don't know where the information is. I'm not going to spend more than 5 seconds looking at that CV. And if I can't find that information, that CV is going on the reject pile. So I like it where it's very clear and simple. So education, work experience, skills, achievements, hobbies, etc. Keep it simple, easy, bang. And I can do that. And the other thing is with application tracking systems like ATS systems that's coming in, ATS systems don't like creative CVs. They prefer plain white and black word CVs, which I don't like. Like, if a human's reading it, it should be a PDF. If a machine's reading it, it needs to be a Word doc. So there are loads of different things. So this is where me and Lucia disagree. But it depends on, it's based on context. If you know that the role that you're applying for is going to be very competitive, a simpler CV might be a good thing. Well, if you're applying for something where there's not a lot of people applying, where the interviewer may spend a little longer on each CV, then perhaps going creative might be useful. Also, look at the role. If you're applying for a business development role in a software company that will be then selling their products to enterprise, they don't care about creativity. They just want the best person for that role. So stick to the numbers on the CV, and that's all I would say.
Totally. Yeah, and that's so true. You need to adapt to the context eventually. So
Yeah.
that's definitely true. Cool. And well, you mentioned already, so in during the interview, well, maybe tone it down a little, because I guess maybe that's one of the things that people love the most about candidates. Are there some other things, that, the companies that you work with, they say, oh, this candidate was so nice because X, Y, Z, like your success cases, what made them successful, basically?
Sure. It's not rocket science, to be honest, and it's very simple. So one is the tone in the interview, that goes a long way. Secondly, what I would say is research, 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 research. And ultimately, if you are successful in that interview, and every interviewer is looking, okay, when they interview someone, then what they're thinking is, okay, if this person is doing this role that we are hiring them for, what will they do, or how fit will they be? And if you're selling, or if you're developing a business, essentially, the easiest way to develop your business is to kind of proposition your product or your service as a solution to your customers' problems. And so that involves doing a lot of research on your customer. And very, really, really good business developers will know how to do customer research really well. And I think that is something that a lot of places kind of don't emphasize enough. And I'm sure Lucia's program does emphasize this a lot. And so
Research. Totally.
yes, 100%. So if you don't do your research, it's going to be so difficult selling. And if you don't do your research on the company, it becomes very obvious in an interview. So it's very easy. I would say 50% of the people that I have interviewed have not even looked at the basic information on my website. It's so easy to make applications these days. It's 2 clicks, and you don't even need to go into a company's website to make an application these days. LinkedIn, Indeed, all these big platforms, they make it super simple to make an application that you, as an employer, we end up with candidates that don't even know that they've applied, or they forgot that they applied to us. So doing your research will definitely get into the top 50%. And this is why things like your terms and conditions, reading your privacy policy, these are things that I can guarantee you no one else is reading. And if you can say, and if you can quote something from the terms and conditions in an answer, that will definitely set you apart from anyone else. That's how you get that second and third interview. But ultimately, you need to be good at the job. If you're not good at the job, that's not going to get you that job. So all I can say is I can get you from like a 1 in 500 to 1 in 10. After that, then it's up to you. It comes down to your hard skills, your soft skills. But these are little hacks that I said that you can easily get yourself into the top 10%.
Cool, really nice. Yeah, and indeed, like research, I'm just a huge fan of it. There's some of our past students here, and they can all confirm that. It's like I'm gonna bore you to death with that, but indeed, it's like it's a very important part, especially during the interview phase.
Yeah.
So Eric just asked us another question. So he said that he worked for a financial market broker as a business developer, and he was working on lead generation, but he wasn't really doing follow-up himself on these accounts. So his question is, how can he quantify that on the CV? Should he give an average number of clients per day, or like how can you quantify that if you were not actually closing those deals?
So Eric, are you on this call? If you are, can you unmute yourself and come on? I would love to have a conversation with you.
Hey.
Yay!
Hey, Eric. Hey, thanks for doing that. So can you tell me a bit more about your role?
Yeah, I was a junior business developer in a Dutch broker, and we generate some leads on the European market, and because of that, we had to explain to the client all the process from the gathering of information until the final opening of the account, and then we were working on a desk, per region, and we didn't had the, as I said, the follow-up of the account after all. When the client just
Sure.
called for information or for a problem, it was on the desk, not, for example, for me.
Sure. Okay. So, were you part of a team, or were you solely responsible for that?
No, part of a team.
Part of a team. Okay. And so was your job to contact like a particular number? Was it cold calling or cold emails, or was it just purely inbound calls that you had to handle?
Both of it's a blend of all of that, because
Okay.
we had the list given by the risk department each morning, and
Okay.
for clients who had taken some information on the company and on our financial products. And yeah, sometimes they were cold calling or, as you said, incoming calls.
Sure. So what I would say is firstly, highlight the fact that you're comfortable doing cold calls. That's not something that a lot of people are comfortable doing. So definitely highlight the fact that you have done it and you're comfortable doing that on your CV. Secondly, what I would say is, put down the average number of calls that you are doing in a day, like cold calls and incoming calls, because that shows to an employer that you are willing to spend time on the phone to build up that relationship. So I would definitely highlight those two things. But it ultimately, when you do work for big companies, your roles become like, you're essentially turned into a cog in a wheel where you're only part of the big picture. And so ultimately, you just got to focus on your role and you got to look at the numbers based on your role. So yes, sometimes, it's not your responsibility to close that deal, but highlight the number of calls that you're doing in a day. And that will give people an idea as to your capabilities. Someone that can pick up and do 20, 25 calls a day is impressive. Or even 20, 25 calls in a day is super impressive. So put that down on there. How long were you in the company, Eric?
1 year and few months.
Okay. And what was your proudest achievement?
I mean, when a client just called me and he was so satisfied by, all the advices and, like, I can say I taught him a little bit about the option products and the futures as well. So he was so happy that he tell his brothers to join as well. And yeah, the three brothers opened accounts at the broker. For me, it's one of my greatest achievement.
Put that on your CV. So just say dealt with a customer. I'm paraphrasing here, obviously. Dealt with a customer and managed to convince his whole family to join the firm as a customer. That is a good skill. Like anyone that's looking at your CV and thinks, oh my God, this guy had a call that came in and he convinced that guy's family to join and become customers. This is the type of person I want in my company. That's what they'll be thinking. So put that in.
Okay.
And on the other side of the coin, what was your worst day at the company?
Yeah, when we had some in the French market, there was a Française des Jeux. It's a lottery company, and our broker didn't offer the IPO, the participation of the IPO, and we had almost, I don't know, 60 to 80 calls a day on the desk just to explain to the client one after the other, I'm sorry, sir, I'm sorry, madam, we can't offer you this, this product. So yeah, it was my worst day ever.
Again, put that on your CV. I won't go into the details of it, but just say, handled customer, again, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially what you need to put down is, you dealt with dissatisfied customers, and that is part of your role. If you sell a product and if that product doesn't work, I can assure you, I will be calling you as a person, not your customer service team. I'll be calling the person that sold me that product in that company. And so if you can deal with dissatisfied customers, that is, again, a great skill set. So I would add that onto your CV as well. There's always positives that you can add. And, even your worst day, yes, it sounds really bad, but the fact that you dealt with it and you came out from that as well also shows that you are fairly resilient. So definitely add those to your CV. Drop me a message on LinkedIn, Eric, afterwards, and I'll be more than happy to have a look at your CV and see if I can help you with editing it and making it as good as it can be.
That's cool. Thanks.
No problem.
Nice. And I just want to point out how great of a business developer you are, Vinay, because you see the opportunity absolutely everywhere, and that's inspiring. I love that.
Thank you.
Oh, it took me 9 years to get there.
It does take a long time, huh?
It does. And you got to think of everything as an opportunity, really. And even the worst days, the best days. The worst days, like in Eric's case, I'm pretty sure he might have done this. You'll say, okay, I know that this is an IPO that you're waiting for and we can't get that to you, but there are competitors of this company or there are other products that are coming up in the near future. Can I take your email address down and I will personally follow up with you next week when this IPO is hitting the market, or when, in 2 months down the line where we've got great products coming in, and I will put you at the front of the queue to make sure that you're one of the first people to get access to that product when it comes out. That is how we turn a dissatisfied customer into a somewhat satisfied customer. At least they're less angry and they won't probably go off and leave like a 0-star review and stuff. So it's handling those things, and you can always turn really, really bad experiences into fairly decent, potentially even a sales lead for your next product that you have coming up.
Totally. Really cool. And Vinay, I have one more question, which is related to something you were mentioning before, because personally, I've been in this situation a couple of times and I did not like it. So I did some interviews. My instinct told me that I shouldn't go in that company because I don't know, I felt that something was wrong. But I decided to ignore that and I went for it anyways. And I was not happy in that company. However, the recruiter and all the people I met, they were amazing, you know, like they really sold the company so well that I was like, okay, it's just an instinct. So that's fine, you know, it's going to be great. But the situation was really not great. And I could have found out those information before. But I want to hear from you if you have some tips to spot when companies are lying or when are overselling themselves, you know, so that you can prevent
Sure.
yourself to end up in some bad situations.
That's a really good question, Lucia. I need a couple of seconds to think about this one.
Go ahead.
And no, the reason is, you know, an interview is a two-way street where, you know, you as a candidate are selling yourself to the company, and I as a company selling myself to the candidate. And you know, we'll be lying if we said we did not overstate some things. Like, you know, both as a candidate and as an employer, you know, you always talk about the positives. You know, like, you know, in Eric's case, I'm pretty sure he will not say, oh, like, you know, I dealt with like 90 angry customers because we failed to do what we promised that we'll do. But you'll turn that into a positive. The same with companies as well. I think ultimately, some of the things are to do with, I think Glassdoor to a certain degree, I do not trust. And the reason is, I think there's two, even though they say it's anonymous and stuff, there are inside, like, you know, everyone I speak to have worked in companies that have been incentivized to leave a review and a positive review. So that's for the reason we are not on Glassdoor. We don't think of it as like a place where we think like it's just not great. And as a small team, people often say the first 5 or 10 reviews are people from like your own family and your friends. So it's a bit crazy. So I think like reviews, I would say, even if it's positive or negative, take it with a pinch of salt. Like, you know, those employees only leave companies for two reasons: whether they've been offered something great somewhere else or they've been fired in that company. And I can assure you, no one that's been fired walks out of that door happy. So you can imagine the review that they're going to leave. So be careful in terms of looking at reviews. Do not give you a full picture. I think this is where it's tricky because I personally have not applied for a job since I was probably like 18. So it's been a very long time since I last applied for a job where I can kind of say, oh, in my experience, this is what happens or what doesn't happen. So I'm not 100% sure if I'm the right person to answer the question. But in your case, like, you know, I would say go with your gut instinct. But also, even if you're in not an amazing job, especially in the next couple of years, the economy is going to be quite difficult. You're much better off being in a job than not being in a job. And yeah, if you're in business development, especially, you have a great opportunity to network. The company is paying you to network. So if you're in a job, it becomes so much easier to find that next job because you are getting paid to reach out to people and speak to them and do research on other companies. So why wouldn't you take a job, even if it's not 100% fit? I do not know, especially if you don't have, especially early on in your career. But that being said, you know, you've got to look after yourself. You've got to make sure that you're the right fit for the company. If you're like, you know, as an example, if you're a fairly introverted person in a very extroverted team, it's not going to be a great environment for you. But if you want to kind of work on those skills, then it could potentially be a great environment, but it may not naturally come to you. So go with your gut instinct. But I would say if that fits anything above 70% and you know that, okay, like, you know, I can see myself working here, but it's not 100% right, I will still take that job at this moment in time, especially early on in your career. The older you get, the more experience you get, the more stats that you have on your CV that you can use to sell yourself. Early on, you don't have a lot. And if someone's willing to take a chance on you, take it, is what I would say.
Nice, thank you so much. And this is more like my personal curiosity, because yeah,
Mm.
we're dealing with this stuff as well as we grow. So when you recruit some business developers, you know, like for your team, what is the one thing that you absolutely want in the business developer, and the one thing that you absolutely don't want? And I have my wants, but I'm really curious to know yours.
This seems like a question that I put to you last week.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I
um,
revert back to you.
Thanks for that one. I think um, it's not just one thing, to be honest, Lucia. I think the first thing is, for me, number one thing when I'm hiring is culture fit. It becomes quite a big deal when you're in a small company because you got to gel in. And so you could have the best stats, but we all know business development doesn't work on its own. You've got to work with the marketing team. You've got to work with the sales team. You've got to work with if you're working for a small tech startup, you've got to work with the developers because you've got to understand what the product timeline looks like, when the next features are going to be added, etc. You've got to be a great team player and you've got to get along with everyone there. And you've got to be able to almost kind of, yeah, persuade other team members in the team as well. So this is where culture fit comes in. So if the person does not fit into the company culture, no matter how great they are, we will not take them. So that's number one. So I think that could be the one thing I look for and the one thing I don't look for. Can I
Yeah.
be super cheeky and just use the same answer for both? No. The other thing is, I think, arrogance. I think this is where confidence, it's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And I think I've, we've worked with people that have been on the wrong side of that. And so as a employer, that's what I look at. There's a very there's a very definitive difference between arrogance and confidence, but the line is very, very fine. So you just got to make sure that you're on the right side. So this is what I said in the interview: make sure you err towards the humble side rather than the arrogant side in an interview.
Cool. Yeah, that's. I'm happy you mentioned it, because how I would call it is more like self-awareness.
Mm,
Self-awareness for me is something extremely important in business development. First, because it's a job, like it's a very high pressure job. You, no
mm.
matter what type of target, but you do get some sort of targets, and it's all up to you. So you need to be
Yeah.
self-aware. You need to know your limits. You need to know when you need to ask for help, and you need to leave your ego behind. That's for sure. So
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point because understanding your weakness is super important. Because if you bring that up as an employer, we can then say, okay, this candidate has an obvious weakness here that they have recognized and they have told us. But don't worry, the other members of the team can more than make up for that, as an example. So, if, I'll give an example. If you're going towards like management VP level roles, I know it's probably a bit further away from what most people are here at the moment in this call. But what I would say is, if you're not the most organized person, when you become a manager or like a VP, it's not that hard to get a company to get you a PA, or like at least a half of, like, you may share a PA with someone else, like a personal assistant or an executive assistant who can then help with the organizational side of things. So that will help. So there are smaller examples. So obviously this is at management or more executive level, but I think earlier on in your career, it's fairly expected that you have fairly obvious weaknesses. And like, know if you as an employer is expecting the complete package from like a 20 to 25-year-old, you're delusional. If that's what your company expects, to not go there. Like, your gut instinct should say, like, stay away from that company, because you will never live up to that expectation. So if you're fairly early on in your career, you want a company that tolerates mistakes, that are okay with you having obvious gaps in your skill set, but provided you're willing to work on it and learn, the company is happy to take you on. That's a great company. Those are the type of companies that you want to focus on. So, if you, one of the things that I would say is this, again, a bonus tip. If you're looking to work for a company, a fairly new startup, look whether the founder has previously worked in startup, because that will then give you a very good idea if the founder's expectations are going to be realistic. Because if they come from Salesforce and they were like the VP of sales there and they started up a new CRM company, their expectations are going to be so different from what if that person has worked in a smaller startup would be like. So look at the CEO, look at the founding team, look if they've worked in startups and they've been in environments where their mistakes were tolerated, and it's a much more forgiving culture. So yeah, these are some things that I would look out for.
Cool. Thanks a lot. And yeah, I'm very happy you mentioned all that, guys. I hope you apply all these things, because also what happens often, and that's something I heard many managers complain about, is that very often business developers are not patient. So they not only want to, get results the day after, which usually you would expect it from the company, it's like, oh, but no, sometimes like business developers expect results to be very fast, but also to get promotions really quickly, and I think you need to be very careful with that, because there is indeed a very thin line in which you get, you're ambitious enough, but you can get your boss pissed, basically, without any filter, and the boss can say, dude, like, calm down, like, you're gonna get there. So that's also something to be careful about with. And one more question. So would you recommend to someone that graduated 1 week ago with no real life experience to take more time towards gaining certificates, like you mentioned earlier, or already start searching for the dream jobs right away?
Okay, so I'm gonna burst your bubble and say there's no such thing as a dream job. And people say this, but like, this often ties in with like, they also say never meet your hero because they will always disappoint, and your dream job will always disappoint. So I think I would say focus on getting a job. Those certificates don't go long enough into, like, certificates are not going to replace work experience. If you can, try and do an internship. Ask your aunt or your uncle or your dad or your mom or your neighbor if you can work with them. The moment that you start working with them, you can add it to your CV. And the moment that you have work experience on your CV, you are going to be much more employable. So you can do that. And, early on in your career, you've got to be willing to work super hard. Like, I would say, if the couple of months leading into your first job, you should be working about 12 to 15 hours a day. And, I'm not saying, you do manual work for 15 hours a day. It's mixing it up. You've got to teach yourself new platforms, new CRM systems, etc., which no university in anywhere in the world teaches you how to use, like HubSpot, which is crazy, or teaches you how to use Facebook's ad platform. These are all things or Google Analytics, there's all these big tech platforms have certificates available for free that you can learn and put on your CV. But do not waste 9 to 5, like from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. doing that. Do that before that. So there's the 5 to 9 and there's the 9 to 5. 9 to 5 focus on work, putting in job applications, things like that. And from 5 p.m. to 9 o'clock, focus on like certificates, learning new platforms, the soft skills, the hard skills, the things that you can add to your CV. Do that after 5 o'clock, because you can have like a million certificates, but if you have zero work experience and can prove that you can use these things, no one cares. And vice versa. If you get your foot through the door and you can use these things, I've hired people for business development roles where they have used HubSpot in the past and they've used Salesforce, but they don't have a certificate to show for it. But that's okay. For me, that's worth more than someone with a certificate. If you have a blank CV and if you're not really getting anywhere, then work on certificates. But like I said, try and focus out on the side as opposed to being your core focus. Your core focus at the moment should be to get a job.
Yeah, I agree. And I always consider, especially, if you're looking for a job and you really need a job, like finding a job is your job. So you definitely be like, you need to be a business developer, basically looking on your job hunting, and definitely indeed, like, also focus on your personal development. That's also important. But I don't think not only for, to show it off to the companies, but more for yourself. Like, I think every time you do whatever type of learning, it should always be beyond your job and beyond the company you're working for at the moment or the company you want to work for. So it should always be something you do for yourself. Because I have, for example, a friend, like, well, it's from Italy, and in Italy we have this thing of doing the master and then another master and then another master, and then we never go to work, unfortunately, sorry. But this guy was like, maybe I should do this master. And I was like, but dude, honestly, you're 30, like, it's time that you put your ass down and just work, and you can also do that, but that's not gonna open you doors, like, if at 30 you don't have a career, or at least start of a career, it's not going to be a certificate to help you out. So in your case, Danj, you're still younger, so that's good. It's not your case, so do both, but do learn because because of your personal development, regardless of the company you end up for. Cool. And then last question, because we have
just before you ask that, I was going to say, Lucia, it's a really good point that you made about the masters and the masters after masters. It's, in my experience, what I've seen is it's that happens in countries where there's high unemployment, especially youth unemployment, where the option of like not, it's either going to university or just sit at home not doing anything. So for some candidates, I understand that, but I'm not saying that's the right. Like, being a master is exactly that. You can't master something without actually having done it in the first place. I'm a huge fan of going to university, work for 3 to 5 years, and then if you want to go and do a master's, then do it. Because that's there to accelerate your career, not like another certificate to add to your CV. It takes the exact same amount of space on a CV as doing a 3-day HubSpot course. So you might as well just spend 3 days on a HubSpot course and just add it to your CV and then try and apply for jobs. I agree. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go on, Lucia. You were about to ask me something.
You gave me a great idea because it's indeed, so of course, we provide training, but our position is really like it should be something practical that you can actually use in the job. So maybe you could consider something more like that rather than just a certificate, because it's a piece of paper. But maybe try to do something which, gives you a network as well and puts you in the right career path. So something like beyond the university or the more traditional certificates. And if you want, we have a class starting on Saturday, so go ahead and check our website. Maybe Silvia can put it there. And
definitely,
that's very fast. So the last question, and it's Augusto asking for it. It's and it's more, let's say, regarding to the to tech and the trends in this sense in the recruitment.
Sure.
And he's asking, what's the use of AI tools in CV selection nowadays? So you already mentioned something with the ATS, and I did work for an ATS back in the days, the SaaS that was heartless. So what's your take on that? So what's the trend in terms of recruitment tech?
So you can't expect a company that's replacing a human with a computer to have a heart. So you should have probably seen that coming when you applied for that job in that company.
That's true.
So just out of curiosity, did their technology pick up Word docs better than PDFs?
It depends. So at the beginning, both of them sucked. So both PDF and Word, and then we were improving it. So basically, our goal was really to make sure that whatever format and whatever layout the CV would have, it wouldn't make any difference. So I think by now that's there. But before, we would accept only a PDF. Word would work indeed better, but because of GDPR and all the privacy stuff and so on, we had to get rid of that. So now we accept every format and every layout.
Sure. So can you just repeat the end of that question that the person asked? Absolutely. Sorry, it's just completely run through my mind.
No worries. I do talk a lot. So what's the use of AI tools in CV selection? And also follow-up question from a recruitment perspective, how important it is to reply to all the candidates
Okay, sure. Okay, 2 really good questions. I think going forward, there's going to be a lot more ATS systems being used. Yes, as Lucia said, they do suck. Some of them suck really badly at the moment. And they're going to potentially and hopefully get better over time. If I use our example, when we put out a job description, it's not even a very senior role. It's not a particularly complicated role. And within 4 days, we got 400. Probably by now, we're probably close to 1,000 CVs. So there's only so much manual sifting that we can do. And we don't use an ATS system. Now I regret it. We should be, and because it would make our job a lot easier. But I think be prepared for a world where there's going to be a lot more ATS systems. So that's the short answer to your question. The long answer, to the second question, replying to all candidates. I sit on the fence, and my heart goes out to people that make a lot of effort to make an application. And I definitely see that, and we're incredibly privileged to get all these applications that we do get, and I don't want to take that away from, and we fully understand how much effort's gone into some of these applications because they're super tailored, and I agree. But if you put yourself in my shoes, hiring is probably 5 to 10% of my time, and 1,000 CVs is a lot of people to come back to with detailed feedback, and as much as I would love to, it's just not possible. And I think replying to all, I think this is where, again, ATS systems can come in handy, because once we reject internally, it could potentially send out an automatic email just saying hey, unfortunately, your application is not going to go any further. Like I said, again, if I have to reply to 1,000 people, it's me copying their email address from their CV, putting it onto an email, copying the message, and then putting it onto there and clicking send. If I do that by 1,000 times, I think I'll probably blow my own head up. So it's just not possible. So I understand exactly where you're coming from, but I also understand I've been in the position and I know how painful
Mm.
it is to reply to everyone. So I think I would say set your expectation as if you're not going to hear back. And if you haven't heard back, if you're a good business developer, you should persevere and you should contact them. Just be like, hey, I just want to follow up. It's been 2 weeks since I applied. I haven't heard back. Even if it's a no, that's fine. I was super excited by this opportunity, and I just want to know if I should continue waiting for a callback because this is a really good opportunity that I was waiting for. If you send a follow-up message like that, that will then help you, because I can assure you, out of 1,000, probably like 10 candidates will do that. It's easier to reply to 10 people than 1,000 people. So I'll definitely come back to you if you send me an email like that, and I'll say, you know what, forget about whatever your CV says. I'll interview you next week because you persevered. And that was a really nice email. That's the type of person I want. So I'll interview you. Here's a link to my diary. Book a call with me. So, you can turn a negative into a positive, and just persevere, be resilient. And, if they do come back and say no, give it a couple of weeks and then just say, I know that you're probably close to this hiring round and you've hired someone. Do you mind taking a couple of minutes to kind of have a very informal conversation with me where you could talk about where I am and where the successful candidate was, so I can know what I can work on? So again, that will be a really good, instead of just replying blankly, just be like, hey, can I have some feedback? That is, I see those emails and I'm super annoyed because I'm just like, I don't have the time to reply to this. And I probably get 10% of the candidates who say that. So I get about 100 emails asking me for feedback. But be a bit more proactive, because you've got to stand out in those emails. It's not just that CV, too many people focus on customizing the CV and making that look amazing. But you could do a lot more by customizing your follow-ups than just your CV. Your CV is 1 of 1,000, and there's very little you can do to stand out there. But in those emails, those are incredibly personal. Tailor that and try and put a bit more effort into that than your CV. And the other thing I would say is good old-fashioned cover letter. It goes a long way. Even if your job does not ask for it, it's a really good place for you to show off how much research that you have done. Do a cover letter, because that will blow the person's mind away. Because like I said, out of, even if it's only 100 people, I can assure you, you're probably one of a handful that will probably send a cover letter. That way you get ahead of the time. But just make sure it's a good cover letter. Don't just copy and paste it from the last job that you sent it to. Put that effort in and you get it. And I always say, if you're applying for more than 5 jobs a week, you're doing too many. It should take you a full day's worth of research. Try reading through a 20-page terms and condition. But if you do read that, you can put things from that onto your cover letter, and that will make you stand out. If you spot a mistake in a cover letter and you put that in an email, just be like, hey, PS right at the bottom, I was reading your terms and conditions. I saw this on the thing. It may not necessarily work, so you might want to look into this. Get your legal team to look into it. That will capture someone's attention. Ultimately, that's what you do when you're applying. You need to stand out, and these are ways you can stand out rather than focusing too much on the CV. I think that's just obvious now.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Vinay. And last time when we did our podcast with you, I really loved the mic drop moment. So is there one last thing that you want to tell to our business developers here to be the best version of themselves and land their dream jobs, although they don't exist? Tell us.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure now. That's a lot of pressure. I think one of the things I would probably say, and the best tip I can give you, especially at this given moment in time, is look for jobs outside of your local region. There's a lot of really good jobs available around the world, and stay away from platforms like LinkedIn and Indeed, because you will be one of many thousand people that apply for that. There are very specific, really cool platforms like workinstartup.com, as an example, or Escape the City, where there are a lot lower number of people applying for a job. That means it's the people that look or review your CVs will spend a bit more time doing it. Because if I know I have 1,000 CVs to sift through, my mentality is I am screening to reject, not screening to see if they have the right skill sets or not. So it's very easy because I'm looking for mistakes. I'm looking for things that, I'm not very tolerant when I'm looking in that, when I'm sifting through CVs, when I have that mentality. Well, when I have 20 or 30, I'm just like, okay, I will read the cover letters. I'll go through the CVs. I'll read each bullet point. So look for platforms where there are not many applications. And so that's what I would say, because on LinkedIn, it's very difficult as a recent graduate or a new current student to stand out, and you're not doing yourself any service. Spend the time doing that application, do that research, put that cover letter, 5 or 6 application maximum per week. And if you can do that, then you will definitely stand out and you have far better success. I can assure you, if you listen to me, I know what it takes to get a job, and I can guarantee that you can get a job, but it's going to take a lot of effort. And if you are willing to put that effort in, within a month, you will be hired. And I can see that someone's just asked. So
Indeed,
it's got workinstartup.com, or just search like work in startup on Google and you'll see it. The other one is called Escape the City. And there are a few other ones as well, but I'm just trying to think, because a lot of the platforms that I tend to speak to quite a few like experienced candidates as well. So there's a few for like more experienced candidates. The other thing is, try and find a really cool startup. If you come across a cool product, send the CEO an email, send them a message on LinkedIn. Just be like, oh, especially with a cover letter and a CV, just be like, it's got a speculative application. If you have not heard of it, search the word speculative application on Google and you can see how to do it. What that means is they don't have a vacancy at the moment, but you are saying, I have all the skill sets and this is what I can do for your company. Create a vacancy for me. And as a recent graduate, you're not going to be very expensive from a company's perspective. Like, a VP of sales will probably cost them like €500,000 a year, or like, anywhere close to that. As a recent graduate, you probably get 10%, maybe even 5% of that. And it's not very expensive. And if you go that extra mile and you send a speculative application, a good one, they will bring you in for an interview. Especially if it's a CEO that really cares about his business, they will bring you in for an interview, or do it over Zoom right now.
Absolutely. I was about to say, like, I love when people take the time to, write to me a very personalized message telling me that they like our product. So it's indeed like you need to have people that believe in the same things as you believe. So absolutely do that.
Yep.
And of course, guys, if you're looking for internships, you do have to check Capital Placement. They have a lot of opportunities. So, of course, go ahead and check their website. We put it already in the chat as a first message. And Vinay, how can we reach out to you if they want to ask you some more questions or, just get in touch with you?
I do hide from most people, so I am very difficult to find. But if you can search me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the only place where I'm available. So just drop me a message on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to help anyone on this call. So obviously, I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me rant about a lot of things. So if there's anything that I can do to help, just drop me a message on LinkedIn. I'll try my level best to try and see if I can help you in any way possible. So thank you for having me on here.
Thank you so much, Vinay. It was great. And everybody has great words of appreciation for you. Thanks a lot. This presentation was great. Totally felt the energy Paolo said. So thank you so much. I can totally agree. It was amazing, so insightful. And I'm totally going to use all your tricks from now on. So guys.
Sure.
I hope you
I should
all
write a book.
Totally. I hope you all enjoyed the webinar. So see you next month for a new webinar. Keep an eye on our website to see the calendar and see what's new. It's going to be in the world of business development next month.
My mic drop moment is listen to our podcast. That's what it's going to be.
Oh,
we
totally.
got things like this on our podcast. So it's called the Career Growth Podcast. Every week on Wednesday, new episode. So listen to that.
Put it here. Perfect. So guys, check it out. And soon you will hear me there too. So that's going to be a nice one.
Oh yeah, you hear a familiar voice there. You'll hear a very familiar voice on there. See.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Guys.
And see you next month then. And see you around on LinkedIn. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.